Before we get into the couple bills that are on the agenda, I'd like to explain the ground rules for today's hearing. As I've stated before, the committee has a long tradition of civility, being courteous and being respectful of one another. And this goes back with the chairman, Delegate Wright, before him, Delegate Lingenfelter, and Delegate Bev Sherwood, who I remember serving with way back when. And while we have different views on a wide range of topics, this committee has always maintained a level of decorum and respect in civil discourse for one another. Secondly, I would ask everyone out of respect to please use your request to speak button. When you have questions, I will recognize you in the order in which you ask to be recognized. Because we have quite a few people here, I want to make sure that we allow sufficient and equal time to hear from the public. I also want to make sure that we have enough time to allow questions from the members. So specifically for each of the bills, here's what I will allow. I'll allow 4 minutes for the patron to present their bill to the committee, 5 minutes to those who wish to speak in favor of the bill, 5 minutes for those who wish to speak in opposition to the bill, and then we'll have 5 minutes for the committee members to ask questions. And of course, you know my demeanor by now. I'm pretty much a pushover, and so I'll be very lenient on these things, particularly when we're going down matters that involve further exploration. But we want to be fair to everyone, so we will have a time clock on all these matters. For the audience, I want to thank you for being here. I know many of you traveled long distances, and I want to thank you for coming. We take your views very, very seriously. Your input is always welcome, and it's always important. And so thank you so much for being here, your right to petition the government. We do not allow chanting, singing, or shouting because that will be disruptive to the business of the committee. I noticed that there are some signs in the audience. I asked you to keep your signs low so that you don't disruptive of views for the people behind you. Many groups organize on Capitol Square, and that is a more appropriate place for demonstrations. And so I would ask you, if you feel the need to demonstrate, to take that outside. Viewpoints should be made at the podium in an orderly fashion. We ask that you identify yourself and state whether you represent any particular group before addressing the chairman of this committee, and ask that you adhere to the time limits. And we have a time clock right here on the right. If there aren't any questions from committee members, we'll call the first bill, and I don't see any questions in the queue. House Bill 961, Delegate Levine, if you would go to the front of the podium to present the bill, we will recognize you for 4 minutes. And Delegate Levine, I understand you have a substitute.
I do. I'd like to move that substitute.
And if I can allow us to pass that around. Okay, why don't you go ahead and explain your substitute, Delegate Levine, and then we'll get in the posture where we'll adopt it. But why don't you walk through your substitute and the difference between the underlying bill and the bill that's before us. Delegate Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would note briefly the underlying purpose of HB 961. The purpose of this bill is to limit the incidence of mass murder. In the last 40 years in the United States, 5 out of 6 mass murders have been conducted with assault weapons. And during the federal assault weapons ban, that number was reduced by approximately 70%. We have listened to gun owners, responsible gun owners across Virginia, and I want to thank them for contacting me. I also want to thank very much the governor and his staff and Secretary Brian Moran for working very hard to find a compromise that protects the rights of responsible gun owners and still limits the assault weapons that have been involved in so many mass murders. The heart of the differences between this bill and the other is that this substitute is less restrictive than the original bill. It allows every gun owner in Virginia who lawfully possesses a weapon to keep that weapon. No one has to give up a weapon. What it does do, though, is it prevents sales, purchases, and restricts various transfers of these assault weapons. It also bans bump stocks, known in the bill as trigger activators, the kind of thing that makes a semi-automatic weapon act more like an automatic weapon. And also, it restricts large capacity magazines. That's the heart of what the bill does. I'm happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. So let me go ahead and ask at this time for those that support the bill to form a line. You have 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
let's go ahead and move the substitute. Properly second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, opposed? All right, substitute is before us. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brian Moran, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. We have been asked why do we continue to pursue this piece of legislation, particularly after you all have acted favorably on 7 of the governor's gun prevention legislation. I'll tell you why, at least I'll attempt to, is, you know, during July when the governor called for a reconvened session, the Roanoke Times wrote an editorial that said, you know, rather than passing new laws, why don't you review the recommendations made after the Virginia Tech massacre? I thought that was actually a good idea. And so we went back, we reviewed it, and a lot of the recommendations had to do with behavioral health. So Secretary Kerry and I conducted an exhaustive review. Turns out the legislature and the Kane administration at that time actually implemented almost all of the recommendations, with one glaring omission, and that is Delegate Plum's universal background check, which you will remedy this year. But, you know, in reading that report, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I also read the facts of that case. And they're horrifying. You know, as Cho stalked the halls of Norris Hall that morning, he came to, you know, shooting. He had 2 pistols, one of which was a high-capacity magazine. He came to one door, and he couldn't gain access because the professor was on the other side of that door with his shoulder preventing access, allowing some of his students literally to jump out the window to survive. And he ultimately got through that door and continued shooting. And all I could think about is, what if he had to reload? What if he had to take the time? Seconds, maybe nanoseconds. A student, when seconds mattered, they could escape through that window. Reloading that magazine mattered. That's why we're here. Just like those students, just like the theater goers in Aurora, just like the school children in Newtown, the concert goers, the nightclub goers in Orlando, Florida. Time and again, this is too often. These are weapons of war, not my words, the court's words. 4 circuits have taken up this bill. Assault weapons are not protected by the Second Amendment because they're weapons of war, and that is, again, the court's words, not mine. They're not protected by the Second Amendment, just like machine guns before them. The court will uphold this legislation. You just need to pass it. I ask you to pass it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Goddard, Virginia Center for Public Safety. It's not about what these things look like. It's not about their features. It's about the combination of what they can do and the damage that they can cause. These are not your average handguns. These are guns that can cause injury without the bullet actually touching the part of the body that they're going to destroy. You can put a bullet into a 9mm bullet into somebody's liver. In most of the places in the liver, the person is going to survive if they get to the hospital fast enough. If you put an AR-15 round into a person's liver, it becomes, as someone described, like a jello mold dropped on the floor. There's no place for that in civilian life. There's no need for that in civilian life. My son probably wouldn't be alive today if he'd been shot with an AR-15 rather than with a 9mm. I ask you to pass this. While they do have uses that would probably fine in the hands of certain people, we don't have a system in place to ensure that they are only in the hands of those good people. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Christian Heine. I'm the Vice President of Policy over at Brady, and we are in strong support of this bill. What we are talking about with this legislation is increased lethality. These guns are fundamentally different. The features of these guns are fundamentally different. When we talk about a barrel shroud or a forward grip, this is a design and a feature of the gun that is literally allows somebody to shoot round after round after round after round without burning the flesh off of the palms of their hand. When we talk about a pistol grip, it's so that we're preventing muzzle creep so that we can continue to fire round after round after round without having to reload. These weapons are accomplish and do and are designed to do exactly what we see over and over again. It's why they are chosen in nearly every single major mass casualty shooting that we see in this country, because they're very effective at doing exactly what they do. They are designed, and these features are designed for the battlefield. They're designed to shoot out a lot of lead in a short period of time, in a small space, and to really do a lot of damage. And that is why they're chosen. That's why we continue to see them. Please do what's right here. Please pass this legislation. If you do so, you will save lives. Thank you.
Let's add one more minute to the clock, and I want you to briefly say, we'll try to get through everyone, say who you're with and your support for the bill.
Thank you. My name is Martina Lyons, and I'm representing the grassroots of the Brady chapters in Virginia. Thank you so much to this body for the very important work you've done this session. We're very, very grateful. This bill in particular, thank you so much, Delegate Levine. This is a life-saving bill. Our children and our grandchildren have been terrorized with having to do firearms, rapid shooter drills in the schools. This is not the way our children should be raised. It should not have to happen. We are alone in industrialized countries in allowing weapons of war on our streets. These weapons were never intended for a civilian market, and every single one of you know that.
Thank you. We have a line behind you, so I appreciate
I urge you all to vote in favor of this bill. It will save lives, and it's what we sent you to Richmond to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, really quickly.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jessica Samuels. I'm here from the Attorney General's office. Attorney General Mark Herring supports this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Really fast.
Good morning, Lori House with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. I know too much about these weapons. I've spoken to the mother personally, up close, of one of the 6-year-olds who was killed at Sandy Hook. My daughter was a victim at Virginia Tech. She survived, thank God. You don't want to know what I know from Noah's mother. Don't let it happen again.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, really quick.
I'm Juliana Bachman from Springfield, Virginia, and I support the bill.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, everyone here that didn't get a chance to speak, can you raise your hand if you support this bill? Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. All right, those who wish to speak in opposition to the bill, please line up. I will. I said at the outset. That we need to kind of quiet down and not be disruptive. Why don't you go ahead and put 6 minutes on there, and so we'll go ahead and get started. Yes, sir. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is DJ Spiker with the National Rifle Association. This is the bill, right? This is the one that's fired up Virginians across the country, that has led to an outcry that your offices have heard for the last 2 months and continued. And your colleagues don't want this bill on both sides, the majority, the minority, the other chamber. Nobody wants this bill. The Secretary Moran spoke very passionately about Virginia Tech. And you will understand by his comments that this bill has nothing to do with assault weapons, because Virginia Tech was taken by handguns, an extended magazine. This is the bill that will make millions of Virginians felons overnight. Possession of a magazine over 12 rounds, an arbitrary number. There is not another state in the country that says 12. There are states that say 10. There are states that say 20. Nobody says 12, so they'll default down to 10. Any person who has a commonly owned sporting rifle, A handgun, in my case, a Beretta 92 FS, 15 rounds. I'm a felon. My wife is a felon for owning a similar handgun. We're felons overnight because of this legislation. This is the bill you're hearing about. This is the bill that your constituents are talking to you about. This is the bill that you are here and you're hearing from us. We strongly oppose this bill. This bill will not make Virginians safer. 11 murders with long rifles in 2018. And unfortunately, tragedies, Virginia Tech and Virginia Beach, both of those tragedies were handguns. But by this bill, you wouldn't know that because handguns are certainly not included. It targets the dark, scary weapons. Delegate Lena's town hall made it very, very passionate and mimicking of what a scary weapon looks like. This bill does not make anybody safer. This bill will not make Virginians safer. What this bill does is make Virginians, law-abiding Virginians, felons overnight. We strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome back to Virginia as one of Virginia's state senators. We miss you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you don't miss me on this bill. I honest to goodness, when I left Congress a year and 8 or 10 months ago, or however long it was, I announced I was leaving. I hoped that I'd never stand up at a dais like this again. I don't believe in hitting people from behind, so I want to make this really, 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 really clear to everybody on this dais. I don't know how this thing got out of DLS without a jacket on it, even in its amended form. Even in its amended form. Let me tell you why. The federal courts in Heller said that you could not ban from possession of citizens weapons in common usage. The word ubiquitous describes to a T the AR-15 rifle platform, the single most common center-fire semi-automatic sporting rifle in the United States, number one. It describes to a T the Glock 19, which holds 15 rounds plus one in the chamber at 16, which would make the possession of one of these after, as I understand the rewrite, after January 1st, 2021, a felony. And so I'm not going to pound the podium. I'm just going to say that you need to make sure you allocate the money in the budget for the lawsuit that's coming. And I want you to hear today, because I like to wish sometimes that I had a crystal ball, that this legislation may very well be the bill that goes before the new Supreme Court of the United States as currently comprised, as the needle begins to tick back in a particular direction, wherein any and all weapons bans are overturned. So proceed, number one, with the Commonwealth's taxpayers and their wallets in mind. Number two, with the jurisprudence not only in the Heller case, but also out of Benitez rulings in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California that say that magazine capacity bans are unconstitutional. Understand the law and bring a fat wallet, and know that you may today, instead of banning these weapons that you're so intimidated by because you fail to understand them, in fact, ensure the ability of Americans to possess them from heretofore. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
My name is David Adams. I represent the Virginia Shooting Sports Association, the state affiliate of the NRA. We have thousands of individual members across the Commonwealth, as well as 26 affiliated shooting ranges and shooting clubs in the Commonwealth. This bill would decimate our most popular shooting discipline program, which is rifle shooting, not only for adults but for youth. Why would a youth get involved in a program if they can't buy the firearm they've been using in the program in the future? I urge you to defeat this bill. It's unconstitutional and will infringe on the rights of all of our members and other gun owners in Virginia.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Philip Van Cleve, President of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. I think Secretary Moran, in a Freudian slip, said this is a gun prevention bill, and I think that's what it is. There is not any redeeming features I can find in the bill, nothing much to save. And by the way, the Virginia Tech Commission, after the Virginia Tech shooting, said having 10-round magazines, if Cho had had those, it would have made no difference. The gun bans would be unconstitutional. We strongly oppose this.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir. My name is Richard Pyle. I'm a citizen of Dinwiddie County. I'm not here because I want to keep my guns. I long for a day when I can put away my guns without fear of my fellow man. Yes, I enjoy shooting. I enjoy the challenge of marksmanship. I enjoy the competition of it. If I thought that lives would be saved by a utopian dream realized, by me giving up my firearms, I would gladly do so. You speak of this mandate by the voters. You speak of this grand idea of removing guns from our streets. You speak of this after having watched nearly every major city in America try these very same laws only to reap higher crime and innocent blood. If this was a mandate, then where were the tens of thousands of your supporters? The polls, yes, they voted. But who were they? Brainwashed urbanites with nothing to change their opinion but Bloomberg television. I was one of more than 25,000 people who arrived on your doorstep when you first threatened us with these draconian laws. We knew...
Can you wrap up, sir?
Sir, I respectfully I'm disinclined to yield right now.
Okay.
We knew that there were risks, that there could be violence, but we came regardless. We came because we believe in our cause. We were willing to put ourselves at risk for our cause.
All right, sir, if you don't wrap up, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Respectfully, sir, this is the last thing I'll say.
Make it quick.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel of arms. Crouch down and lick the hand which feeds you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity ever forget that you were our countrymen.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm sorry. I do want to hear from you, your representative from I believe the industry.
Yes, sir.
And so I will give you 30 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Please, everyone else, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to get to you. Time has expired, but I did want to hear from
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. My name is Knox Williams. I'm with the American Suppressor Association. We submitted extensive written testimony, and I believe I've met with every member or your staff. It's important to note that a silencer or suppressor, call it what you will, they're the same thing. The quietus is still louder than a jackhammer striking concrete. These are the most heavily regulated firearm accessory in the country and have been so since 1934. The ATF maintains a strict federal registry of every suppressor in lawful hands, including over 75,000 here in the state of Virginia. A direct quote from ATF, who governs them, is, quote, "Suppressors should not be viewed as a threat to public safety," end quote. The National Hearing Conservation Association also supports them as a method to help protect people's hearing by reducing dangerous noise levels.
Thank you.
For those reasons, we ask you to oppose this.
Thank you. I'm sorry, time has expired. I'm not going to be able to get to you. If you support this, or rather oppose this bill, please raise your hand. Great. Thank you very much. Now, I'll turn it over to the committee. Thank you all for your testimony. Delegate Rush, you are recognized, and we'd like to put 5 minutes on the time keep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for the patron, please. Or maybe a couple, is that okay?
Delegate?
Yeah, hey, thank you. Delegate Levine, are you familiar with D.C. versus Heller, the Supreme Court decision?
I am. I'm also familiar with the Fourth Circuit, the First Circuit, Second Circuit, Third Circuit, Fourth Circuit, and D.C. Circuit that have upheld bans far more restrictive than this legislation.
Thank you. Are you familiar with in the Heller versus D.C., the common use of firearms in common control?
I am aware the United States Supreme Court finds bills like this constitutional. And if the gentleman has a problem with the United States Supreme Court, obviously, you can take it up with them, but that's not my decision. This bill's constitutional.
Delegate Davis, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh. Delegate Davis.
Thank you. Delegate, can you please tell me the purpose of a muzzle brake or a compensator?
All of these features are designed in the federal. They come from the federal assault weapons ban, which, as I mentioned, decreased mass murders by 70%.
I understand, but
so what they're doing is these are features that have been vetted by all the experts, including the governor and the governor's staff.
I understand, Delegate. Can you tell me what the purpose of a muzzle brake is, please?
One's designed to keep the muzzle from going up, and the other's designed to prevent the recoil.
Mr. Chairman, is this the time for speaking to the bill or no?
Delegate Rush, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you said this does not prevent if you already have the weapon or the firearm at the current time. Would I be able to sell that?
After January 1st, 2021, you could not sell the weapon. There are limited transfers allowed.
Does the state of Virginia plan on compensating folks who've now lost value of their legally owned possession?
Since you can keep your gun, I do not believe you've lost value to it. Plus, of course, you can sell it prior to January 1st, 2021. That's certainly allowed.
Delegate Wilt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate Wilt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, and audience. So this is a very passionate issue, and been a lot of testimony shared here, but one thing that I do want to make note of, in the Secretary's comments, he cited the tragedy at Virginia Tech. Truly was a tragedy, and we've learned a lot of lessons from there. But one commonality between that and some of the other areas that he mentioned was the issue of gun-free zones. And Mr. Chairman, these are basically killing grounds. They're loaded. Mr. Chairman, if you're an individual, we cannot legislate morality, and we cannot stop evil. What we've done in those gun-free zones is created a target area for some insane person, purposely or under some medical problems or so forth, that truly needs to get help. But we've created situations. Those are easy targets. They're not going to go where an armed citizen is there to protect themselves. And I would cite also that instructor that was behind that door, that if he were able to be armed instead of being in a gun-free zone, perhaps he could have gone, when that individual was reloading, he could have gone out, taken out that perpetrator, and saved some of the other lives in the building. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Delegate Rasool.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a quick question for the gentleman from industry. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Knox.
Yes, sir.
My name is Knox Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Knox, just a quick question. You brought up some good points. As we know, of course, this is the legislative process is very long. There will continue to be conversations, and bills evolve over time. We're committee, things cross over, go to the governor. So this is a long process as we try to make sure we get things right. But specifically to your point, just can you clarify what you had said earlier about the silencers piece of that? You're saying that it's very heavily regulated right now, and I guess what you're advocating for is that as the process evolves, for us to take a harder look at the silencer piece to ensure that we account for that it's currently heavily regulated?
Sure. So our position is essentially that these have been heavily federally regulated since 1934, and that those federal regulations are more than exhaustive, that additional state-level regulations should not be imposed upon suppressors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
thank you, Delegate Rasool. Delegate Wright.
Mr. Chairman, speaking to the bill,
You're recognized,
it was stated earlier that there were no need for these type weapons. All you need to do is look around at what's happening in our country, the attacks upon innocent individuals. We have the right to protect ourselves, and it seems like to me that really the goal is to remove all guns, and then what's going to be the source of protection for the homeowner when their family is under attack? There are shooting in churches. Recently, there's been an example of a person who was on duty there as a guard, and they were able to take care of the persons that came in to attack citizens because he was armed. And I think it's very important to understand this is a constitutional right that we have, and the courts have ruled that we have a right to have them. And I think it's an abomination for this General Assembly and this committee to pass bills that will take away our constitutional rights. We do have a need for these weapons. We do have a need and a right to protect ourselves, and I think that that's one of the most important rights that we have in the Constitution is the Second Amendment right. Second Amendment, and I think it's something we need to uphold. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Bourne. Delegate Bourne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it has been said over and over again that these are sporting rifles, that they're not going to do anything. It has even been suggested that what happened at Virginia Tech or any other school was because it was a gun-free zone. But let's be very, very, very clear. I would remind everyone about the tragedy in Dayton, where a gunman, armed with a legally purchased military assault rifle, was killed in 30 seconds. But guess what? Because he had one of these weapons we are addressing today, 9 people are dead in 30 seconds. These guns were never, ever designed for civilian use. They are military assault rifles designed to kill as many people as possible. And so, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I would move the pending question.
Substitute motion. Move to lay on the table.
We got a motion to lay on the table, properly seconded. This is non-debatable to lay on the table for those that are in the audience and members on the committee. This means to defeat the bill. So the motion is to lay on the table. Please vote on the electronic voting board. Levine?
Oh, I vote no.
Levine votes no. Lay on the table fails 12-9. I've got a motion to report and a properly second. Please vote on the electronic voting board. You've already made the substitute motion. We're loading up the motion to report with substitute. Members, please vote. Clerk will close the roll. Bill reports with substitute 12-9. Thank you, Delegate Levine. Committee will be at ease. Committee's at ease.